So your items on today's agenda relate to the expansion of options. And the goal that we've articulated is to grow our existing and recruit new high-quality providers who can deliver education options that we know are most effective for re-engaging, retaining, and graduating these youth. And we want to ensure, as I've said, that these programs are aligned to the segments of students that we've identified and are placed in the communities of need. We've completed 3 cycles of requests for new options. We began in 2011 with the New Schools RFP, and for the first time, that RFP included a request for option schools. We've included that request again in the 2012 Call for Quality Schools, and then in 2013, in January of this year, at the direction of Dr. Bird Bennett, who saw the urgent need in beginning to address the gap that exists between capacity and potential demand, we released an additional RFP off-cycle. Some things about the RFP and our approach to expanding these options. Regarding governance, the good news is that we have a range of governance models. We have option schools that are district staffed, we have charters, we have contract schools, and we have a program that's available to us under the state called the Alternative Learning Opportunities Program that we can also use. The good news about having the right range of models is that some of them offer us the additional flexibility that we really need to tailor a school option to the needs of a particular segment of students. So things like non-traditional scheduling for many of these kids who are working or caring for other children in their family. And then some flexibility around which credits we require. Our competencies are also important. Required features include a small learning community with intensely personalized learning paths for these students, comprehensive support for all their social, emotional, and behavioral issues that may have in the past impeded their successful engagement in school, program design that allows kids to move faster in terms of recovering all the lost time and skills and credit and helping them get through across the stage for graduation before they age out of our system. And then connections to career and college that are intensive so that every child completes with a plan for post-secondary. And finally, providers who have a track record of working successfully with this population. And so that brings us to the items that are in front of you today. These include approvals from the options RFP of 2013, and this would be for school year 14-15 openings. And there are 2 things that we are requesting approval of. One is approval of a multi-site dropout charter. These are special charter schools that were created by the state for the district specifically to serve our out-of-school population. And that would be with Pathways in Education. They'd serve 660 students in their first year with a potential to grow to 1875 over time. They currently do serve kids in the district and would be converting their existing sites into their charter. Also requesting approval of Camelot School, Excel Academies, 2 contract schools that would serve old and far students. And there'd be 375 students at each school. The planned communities include Woodlawn and another to be determined in cooperation with the district and community members. And then we're also requesting final approval from an item from the 2012 Call for Quality Schools, and that's an opening for this fall with Chicago Excel Academy. That's also a Camelot school, and that would open in Englewood, which is by far our most underserved community for this population. And that contract school would serve kids who are old and far, 375 students. And the plan is to locate it in the formerly vacated Guggenheim School building. If these items are approved, these options, along with others approved this year, will expand the district's capacity to serve our out-of-school and off-track students in option settings by an additional 4,175 seats in school year 14-15. This growth will nearly double our ability to serve and engage these underserved youth and allow us to help change the trajectory of many lives. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Barbara?
Jen, I have two questions. The first is related to locations. So other than the West Inglewood, or the Inglewood campus that you talked about, the one we're approving that'll open this fall, most of these locations are not in the most critical areas. So they're in important areas, but they're not, at least on the map that you didn't put up, but the one we have. Mm-hmm. So I just want to know what's going to be the focus. So Roseland, Austin, where there's a real need, are not currently in line, at least in the next 2 school years, to get a school addressing this population. So I'd just like to know what's the path to that, because that's a significant issue.
So there are, and it's not in the presentation, there were alternative learning opportunity program providers that were approved by you last month, including Ombudsman and Edison Learning, where they are actually out in the streets now talking to community action councils and faith-based leaders and community organizations in those target communities with the goal of creating or finding the site that will work and having options open in those communities this fall.
And then my second part of my question relates really to PACE. And, I know we're limited by resources and by providers, but we're going to double in 2 years, which is fabulous, but there still leaves well over 15,000 kids not served. So I'm just thinking, what are you thinking about PACE?
Right. So if with all the providers that have been approved this year, if everyone performs incredibly well, and we have the resources, and we continue to learn that we need the demand based on what we're seeing. We're going out for the first time and really actively trying to recruit kids. So there's a lot that we'll learn about who will come back and why. But informed by all of that, if we work with these providers and support them to grow, they actually have the capacity to deliver 20,000 seats to the district over the next 5 years.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a little bit of my question. One of the things about the population, as you well know, is sort of our data and reachability. So if you think about the 57,000, what is y'all's sense that we can actually, make contact? Do we have the right data to be able to reach those students and try to recruit them back in? And what's the confidence level there?
So we're doing a lot of early learning right now. Based on some early results from our student outreach and engagement centers, where they are doing this work now for the first time, they're seeing of 650 students actually contacted and engaged in a conversation, 650 out-of-school youth. 250 of them have returned and either enrolled in one of our school programs or in a GED program or a workforce program that we've connected them to. So we'll continue to monitor that really carefully and see how many kids come back. We have a lot to learn about why kids left and what they want.
Yeah, exactly. But if you step back from that, the step before that, if you have 1,000 names, do you all have a sense of the 1,000, how many you're actually able to make contact with based on having the right information and numbers and things like that?
I don't have, it's a challenge, certainly. Process, I don't have that in front of me, but that's where, because contact information changes so frequently for our students, that's where the relationships with community-based organizations is really important. So not only does the staff in our student outreach and engagement centers work closely with those community-based organizations, it's our expectation that every one of these option schools will reach deep into the community to help us find those kids. So if we don't have the right phone number, someone in that community knows who that student is, or knows a family where there's a child in the household who hasn't completed. So we will be attacking it on several levels.
Oh, Jesse?
You mentioned that you're finding out why some of these students leave. How does those learnings and that data get back into the general, how to get to the network chiefs? How does it get across our entire district?
Yeah, and so we have to start collecting it systematically, and part of what we do is a survey with students when they re-engage with us so that we can start to capture that information. It's been being captured by YCCS and other school providers for years, and we just need to aggregate it and make sure that it's shared with everyone who's thinking about how to hang on to the kids as
Right.
well as pull them back in and serve them.
So is there a specific vehicle to do that? And then how do we measure if folks are using the data? There's a lot of learnings that happen around here, and it's a big system. I think sometimes we miss the opportunity to capture some of those learnings and not consistently or constantly repeat mistakes.
Yeah, and so it doesn't exist now, but we're working on it now. We're working on a common application and survey for students who we are out there finding and pulling back in, and we'll work with John
At some
Barker to
point in the
make
future,
sure that
maybe
it's
you can
shared
come
with
back
everyone.
and kind of tell us how, and especially from the networks, how they're utilizing this information, how's it changing how they're working with students, how's it changing how every teacher, interacts with a student in the classroom, so that we don't continually keep adding to this 56,000.
Sure,
Stem the tide at the same time that we have to address the students who are out.
Yeah, we have asked John, and Jen has been working very close with John Baca in the newly created Office of Accountability to establish such a system. I think that what we learned quite frankly, from Dr. Hines, a conversation with Dr. Hines and a subsequent conversation with Carlos, was that many of our principals did not and don't have alternatives or options for young people when they find young people off track. And so when principals don't have that access or that information, as you pointed out, children disappear. And so if principals know what options exist for children, we can better attract and maintain our children. But John is collecting the anecdotal data, which is really what it is, more qualitative in terms of why students leave, but what I think the important question is also what brings some of them back. And some just say, I'm gone, I'm out of here, and I'm not coming back. And we need to dive deeply. I think we intuitively know some of the answers, but John is setting that system up so that we can really learn and get that information back to the board, but as you pointed out, more importantly, back to the field and back to the schools.
First of all, I want to commend Dr. Bird Bennett and you, Jennifer, because this is a passion of mine, and I see many of the things that I think will help. I'm still, to piggyback a little bit on what Jesse said, I would like later, if not today, to know how the departments are working together to get this information back to the schools. And definitely, when I hear, I heard you mention that there will be some things going on this summer, and it will be online. That's just a red flag to me, because half of us didn't read it. We probably should have. I think if we don't have sessions where principals are educated, I'm recommending that they be educated face to face, because the bottom line is where they will be able to keep the kids in school, and if that child doesn't fit, at least know a school to recommend. So I hope, it doesn't mean you're not going to do it, but I hope that there will definitely be some face-to-face sessions working with the principals. And I'd also like to know, because because of our visits, Jennifer, how will we educate the charter community? I ran into as many high school students who had been, for lack of a better term, came from a charter school. We won't say put out, but they came from a charter school, and they came just as many as from the regular high schools. I saw them equally, if not more. So how, if they're not in our professional development, how are we going to get the information to support them also?
So to your point, Dr. Hines, and I'm looking at Jack Elsey from the Office of Innovation and Incubation, and it really has not been, although Jennifer's doing the presentation, we don't view the option school strategy as a strategy in isolation. to the point relative to the principals, Denise Little, the chief of chiefs, is working to ensure that there are not only the meetings for principals to be informed, but that the chiefs carry that information as a regular thread through their meetings with principals. And secondly, because this board and the policy and the belief of this board and clearly this administration is that all of the children belong to us, is that it's got to be Jack's responsibility with the charter contract community to ensure that those conversations and those opportunities for PD sharing of information is consistent throughout the system. So as soon as that this summer work is completed and we perfect that, Dr. Barker, you'll have that ready tomorrow? We'll get that information back to you. But we are working on it, and we'll get it to the board so that you can see how that information flows.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any others? Thank you very much, Jen and Barbara.
Members of the board and President Vitale, as I conclude this report, I'd like to add just one other bit of information covering our budget deficit. As you're aware, CPS faces a historic deficit of close to $1 billion. The deficit is real, and the challenges it presents for our district, our schools, and our classrooms are real. Since 2011, we've made reductions at central office, operations, administrative spending of nearly $600 million in order to avoid cuts across the classroom. This year, we propose an additional $52 million in reduction to central office direct spending. But as we look towards the future, the simple truth is that we cannot cut our way out of this deficit. Federal, state, and local revenues have declined or remained flat for the last 3 years. And while pension payments, teacher salary increases, and other obligations we're required to pay continue to rise by the hundreds of millions of dollars, we simply do not have an opportunity to gain additional revenue, and as well as our spending reductions can't be kept at a pace with these increases. The situation is unsustainable, untenable, and unfair to over 400,000 students and their families who depend upon this district to provide them a quality education, the quality education that they quite frankly need in order to achieve their dreams and to compete as we move further into the 21st century. As members of the Board of Education are aware, the absence of pension reform will result in an increase to the district's pension payment obligation by $400 million in fiscal year 2014, which is the main driver of our historic billion-dollar deficit. The magnitude of this challenge cannot be overstated. It threatens our ability to continue to keep cuts away from the classroom, our capacity to provide every child with a high-quality, well-rounded education, and our principals, teachers, students have made steady progress over the past 2 years. We just recently announced that students are on track for setting record graduation and attendance rates. These increases translate into real progress and mean that thousands more students are attending school and are graduating from our schools. The progress, however, is being supported by several key factors at our lower level, at our elementary schools as well. Investments in full-day kindergarten, investments in the full school day, in STEM, IB, and other programs that provide our students with the tools they need to be successful. Our students can't afford for us to slow the progress that has been made. During the past legislative session in Springfield, many of those who understood the magnitude of the consequences to Chicago students worked tirelessly to pass meaningful pension reform to protect our investments in Chicago's next generation. I think everyone wants to see that progress continue. However, when the session held on May 31st, the legislature adjourned without an agreement on how to address our pension cuts. Our leaders in Springfield have pledged to work throughout this summer to address the state's pension crisis. The mayor has pledged to address the pension crisis. This board has pledged to address the pension crisis, and members of our team and staff have spent their Memorial holiday and other days in Springfield seeking such a relief for our students. However, we're not sitting idly by over the summer waiting for Springfield to pass much needed relief. And I've directed my financial team to continue to seek additional cost savings opportunities throughout the system so that we can strive to restore the precious resources that we have that are being limited that go to our classrooms. I have to state again, having seen many districts with severe budget deficits, the one thing is that you finally reach a wall where you know you cannot cut your way out of it. The deficit will continue unless there is increased revenue. We will not be able We will not be able to solve our challenges without support. We'll need the continued collaboration of all of the stakeholders, including our parents, community leaders, and legislators, to find a solution that is lasting, not temporary, and that will enable us to meet our immediate financial challenges while maintaining the critical investments that support student learning. My team and I will be relentless in pursuing pension reform and other savings for CPS in the coming days and weeks to protect our investment. If there are any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them, but this concludes my remarks to you, and I thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Any questions for Barbara at this point? Thank you very much, Dr. Bennett. Again, at this juncture, I'd like to remind everybody that you can schedule office hours with board members. If you'd like to do so, you can call the board office at 773-553-1600, and we would be pleased to see you. Madam Secretary, would you please share the details for the next board meeting?
Thank you, Mr. President. The next board meeting will be held on July 24th, 2013. Advanced registration will open at 8 a.m. on July 15, 2013, and close on July 19, 2013 at 5 p.m., or when the 60 slots fill, whichever is first. If anyone has any questions about this process, please contact the board office for our assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now proceed with today's public participation, and you can invite a representative of the CTU.
Thank you, Mr. President. So our first speaker then will be Jesse Sharkey, representing Karen Lewis from the CTU, followed by speaker number 1, please, Martis Tony, then speaker number 2, Jerry Young, followed by speaker number 3, Marquita Ross, and then speaker number 7, Marshetta Ross. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President Vitale, members of the board. We are facing deep, painful cuts at local schools, cuts that are draconian and will have a massive negative effect on the instructional program at those schools. Make no mistake, these cuts will hurt kids, and we wish that you would acknowledge that reality. Because frankly, it's misleading to say that we are, quote, keeping the cuts away from the classroom without acknowledging how deep the cuts in the local school budgets actually are. What is the total number of cuts in the school budgets? And I know that you've claimed that they're not final budgets, but in the budgets as they currently exist, what are they? Are we talking about $200 million? I feel like we owe it to the people of Chicago to tell the truth about that number. That is to say, you will hear over the course of today testimony after testimony, whether it's from Whitney Young or from Kennedy or from Kelly, et cetera, about how they're looking at facing tens or dozens or 1 or 2 layoffs of critical educational personnel. And we'd like to know what that picture actually looks like. And that becomes a precondition for talking. Look, Barbara Bennett just got done saying, we have to look at cutting pensions. From the point of view of the organization that represents teachers and many retired teachers as well, where cutting pensions means taking the food out of the mouths of retired teachers in many cases, people who don't get Social Security, an average pension of $40,000 a year. That's what we're talking. Yes, they want to cut that quite dramatically by $145 billion. That's one of the proposals on the table. But before we can even think about that, we need revenue for our schools and resources for our schools. And we want to know, will the board join us to demand a fair income tax out of Springfield? We want to know, will the board join us in the call that the mayor declare a TIF surplus and return those surpluses to the schools? And so, for example, two TIFs recently just got extended by a dozen years, the Michigan Cermak TIF and the Madison TIF. And those monies are now going to be used to fund a $55 million taxing TIF funded stadium plan for DePaul and a hotel that goes with it. And it's moving in precisely the wrong direction. If we're truly revenue starved, we need to see a good faith effort to actually pursue revenue. Finally, help us pressure the Bank of America, Loop Capital, and the other banks to return the windfall that they've made on interest rate swaps over the last 4 or 5 years. It is imperative for us to pursue revenue in a situation where we're seeing steep and draconian budget cuts that'll hurt kids in the local schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for Martis Tony. Last call for Jerry Young. Last call for Marquita Ross. And last call for Machetta Ross. We'll move on to the next speaker, please. Speaker number 4, Georgia Waller, followed by speaker number 5, Mary Cooper, followed by speaker number 6, Shauna Rates, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Georgia Waller. I'm here today with parents from Beard Special Education Center to address the budget cuts that are slated for our school and the impact those cuts will have on our students. Beard is a specialty school that services students between 3 to 8 years of age. Most of these students have profound and severe disabilities. The population of autistic students at Beard School is about 90%. Beard provides a variety of early intervention and support services for these students, from clinicians who assess and manage students' behaviors to paraprofessionals and teachers who are highly qualified to work with students with severe and profound disorders. Before 1990, the estimated diagnosis of children with autism was 5 in 10,000. Today, the Autism Research Institute estimates that number to be 1 in 88. Some with estimates as high as 1 in 50. These students need places like Beard with special educational settings to help them grow into productive members of society. Some of our parents had this to say after learning that CPS wants us to possibly cut 21 positions from Beard School, which has 160 students and a 60% poverty rate. Quote, "Cuts in education can be counterproductive to our city's economy and well-being. Cuts in special education can be especially disastrous. If we fail to invest in kids like my son, we will see in the future more dropouts, more autistic adults on disability and Medicaid, more homelessness or institutionalization, and far fewer adults with autism lending their special talents and gifts to society." Another parent states, "I am a parent of a nonverbal autistic child."
Ms. Waller, excuse me, can you please conclude?
Yes.
Thank you.
She was never able to express to me how her day was. But because of Beard teachers, she's able to do so. The cuts slated for Beard will increase class sizes and cut in half the number of aides in the classroom, sacrificing the safety and the opportunity for learning for these vulnerable students. Budget cuts will cut off the opportunity for our students to go from dependent to independent lives. We invite you to visit Beard School and see for yourselves the impact that our teachers and staff have on our students' lives before finalizing your budget. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Ms. Waller.
Our next speaker, please, Mary Cooper, followed by speaker number 6, Shauna Wrights, and then speaker number 8, please, Martin Ritter, followed by speaker number 9, Queen Sister.
To the members of the board and CEO Barbara Byrd Bennett, thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Mary Cooper, and I'm a proud parent of CICS Wrightwood, a student and PTA president. I will be brief in my remarks, but want to make sure I took the time to thank Ms. Adrian Zapp, President and CEO of Chicago Urban League and CPS board member, 2013 commencement speaker and school partner. Ms. Zapp, our principal, Mr. David Lewis, extended an invitation to you after you met with one of our esteemed alumni here on a board meeting this spring. And we were so delighted that you were able to come and inspire our 8th grade graduates who are now going to an impressive array of high quality CPS high schools this fall. I also want to thank Dr. Barbara Byrd Bennett for meeting with Charter Parent United recently. CPU are parents of students in Chicago Public School who chose charter schools because we felt they are the best option for our children. All of us have seen positive differences charter schools have made in our children's education. And we believe that charter schools, families deserve equal in funding and a voice in the future of children's education. We look forward to continue our work together. Last but not least, I would like to share just a few of CICS Wrightwood academic...
Ms. Cooper,
yeah.
excuse me, can you please conclude?
Thank you. CICS Wrightwood academic accommodations. First, number one, we are recognized as the CPS Level 1 school. ISAC composite score increased from 46.5% in 2006 to 81% in 2012.
Ms. Cooper?
Thank you again, and have a safe summer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cooper. Our next speaker then will be speaker number 6, please, Shauna Wrights, followed by speaker number 8, Martin Ritter.
Members of the board, I'm Wildwood's LSC chair, and I stand before you with Principal Cunat from Wildwood School. Last month I was before you supporting her, and now she's here supporting me as we try to address Wildwood's overcrowding. Since last month, 2 changes have happened, the first of which is positive in that we are very happy because we had some really great responsiveness from upper management at CPS, specifically Tim Cawley, Pat Taylor, and Kara Krantz, who all basically have been really helpful in working with us to come up with a short-term solution for this next year. They have come in to Wildwood with an architect to try and use every nook and cranny possible. We're even converting a bathroom into an office to try and address the overcrowding. But that's positive because at least it's a short-term solution for next year. The second thing that's happened is, unfortunately, the budget cuts, which I do not have enough time to talk about in my 2 minutes. But with respect to our space issues and our overcrowdedness, we are going to be unable to fund some of the programs which we have used to help address the overcrowdedness with pull-out groups. We specifically had one very successful program with retired teachers that we were able to fund, so we'd had pull-out groups to address those with our struggling learners and our accelerated learners, and we found that to be very, very fruitful, but unfortunately we will no longer be able to afford that. We need to appear in the 10-year plan. We need a long-term solution, and that is why I'm before you today, and that's where we want, that's our bottom line, is what we want. We are still 175% overcrowded. The demographics show continued growth, especially if you look within our attendance boundaries and you use the demographics that CPS has provided.
Ms.
We will
Wrights,
continue this growth.
excuse me, can you please conclude?
I will.
Thank you.
In conclusion, Wildwood embodies the spirit of CPS and the vision of an IB school. We are a model school. We will continue to be a model school to help all those other IB schools. And Wildwood, I heard Dr. Bennett use this word many times. We are a smart investment. So when you're looking for smart investments in CPS, Wildwood is a very smart investment, and we look forward to seeing our name appear in the 10-year plan for relief from overcrowding.
Thank you, Ms. Wrights. Our next speaker, please, Martin Ritter, followed by speaker number 9, Quinn Sister, and then speaker number 10, please, Kathy Murray, followed by speaker 12, Bonita Robinson, and then speaker number 13, please, Denia Linker.
Good afternoon. I make 2 points. First, that the West Loop community needs a new high school. Second, according to the research by the Grassroots Collaborative, CPS has paid out more than $120 million in 10 different interest rate swap agreements. These agreements by local government organizations like CPS are backed by our tax dollars and are locked into interest rates of 3 to 6% for loans negotiated during the last 5 to 10 years. If the interest rate goes up, banks cover the losses and return money back to the public organization by swapping a certain percentage back under interest rate swap deals. But after the economy crashed, the Federal Reserve lowered lowered these interest rates to less than 0.5% in an effort to bail out the failing institutions. The banks, however, did not drop their interest rates for CPS, and recent interest rate swaps from Bank of America reportedly have taken $35 million from CPS annually. Chicago parents and community leaders recently met with Bank of America representatives in May regarding the renegotiation of these agreements. At the meeting, Vice President Patricia Holden said, quote, CPS could renegotiate, but they haven't approached us. This is between two parties, and one of the parties is not at the table, end quote. Other swap agreements are held by Jim Reynolds of Loop Capital. I think many of you know who that is. So I ask you, CEO Barbara Byrd Bennett and Board of Education members, are you really trying to find the revenue to make our schools run at a 21st century level? Or are you protecting the profiteering of clouded bankers and corporate financiers who have a cozy relationship with our mayor? Who will you put first, the 400,000 children in CPS or a few extremely wealthy financial institutions? If renegotiating these deals lands you $500,000 or even $1 million for our kids, is it not worth it? Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for Queen's Sister. Next speaker, please. Speaker number 10, Kathy Murray.
Good morning. I have a phone number for everybody. Here it goes. You might want to write this down. 708-364-3300. I'll repeat that for everybody. 708, do you want to write it down? 364-3300. That's the phone number to the Orland Park School District 135. Orland Park just recently renegotiated their debt. Their school board met and they renegotiated their debt with their lenders. They are now on schedule to pay off their loans early. So the superintendent is Dr. Carol Kunst, and I'm sure she'll walk you through the process and share with you how they did it. A very small school district led by parents and community members in the suburbs, not far from here, that renegotiated their loans with the banks. In addition to that, I want to say since 2010, we've been hearing budget cuts, budget cuts, budget cuts. Keep it away from the classroom. We're just going to cut at the network. We're going to cut downtown. Every time I call downtown, there's no one to answer the phone anymore. So, and I'm sure everyone at 125 South Clark agrees with me that you cannot keep cutting the budget. There's nothing left to cut. So again, CTU stands, and we continue to encourage the Board of Education to seek other means of revenue so that you do not have to constantly rely on cutting budgets. I have with me today a parent and child from Marcus Garvey, and their concern is now that their school is remaining open, what kind of budget cuts are going to be hitting the receiving schools? What kind of budget cuts are going to be hit at the neighborhood schools that are left open? That's what we're concerned about here today. And are the iPads, Sean wants to know, are the iPads still being offered across the city? Any answers to that? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please, Bonita Robinson, followed by Diana Linker, and then speaker number 14, Glory Astorga, followed by speaker 19, Gregory Astorga.
Good morning. My name is Bonita Robinson. I'm a retired reading specialist. When expressing opposition to school closings at the February 27th board meeting, I gave each board member and CEO Bennett via board secretary written presentation, which began with the following words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Cowardice asked the question, is it safe? Expediency asked the question, is it politic? Vanity asked the question, is it popular? But conscience asked the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. This exact quote was used by Ms. Bennett on May 22nd to justify this board's annihilation of 50 neighborhood schools whose names were not even mentioned as the votes were cast. It was horrendous to hear it used in such a hypocritical context. And I agree with Sun-Times writer Mark Brown, who criticized Ms. Bennett, quote, using a quotation from Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to defend a policy decision that I can't imagine King would have favored. King would have been more likely to lead a campaign for an elected school board, end quote. Today, I ask again the question I asked this board on April 24th. Has this board discussed the University of Chicago's speculation that school closings may be a major contributor to the widening of the black-white achievement gap? If no, then in addition to being racist, CPS school closings also exemplify negligence. If yes, the public needs to be included in plans to address this travesty. Nelson Mandela, please heed his words when he says, quote, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than in the way it treats its children," end quote.
Ms. Robinson, excuse me, can you please conclude?
I'm at the end.
Thank you.
Your mistreatment and miseducation of our children are unacceptable and must be replaced by the excellence and equity that they so deserve. No school closings, no budget cuts. Do what is right. You didn't give me an answer before, but please include us in this discussion. Our children, the gap has widened over 20 years.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Good morning. My name is Adina Linker. I am a parent of a child at Lane Tech and at Jones Prep. Lane Tech just reported their largest achievement increase in the history of their school in their ACTs using their current curriculum. In light of the drastic and unrealistic budget cuts, I went looking at the capital plan for 2014, and I found an investment of $40 million in Common Core materials. With professional development estimates around $1,900 per educator, we can anticipate another $38.6 million for our district. Over 350 esteemed education stakeholders have reviewed the Common Core standards and declared that there is no constitutional basis for national standards, assessments, or curricula. There is no consistent evidence that the national curriculum leads to a high achievement in academics, let alone the justification of a single high school curriculum. There is no body of evidence that suggests a best design for curriculum sequences in any subject. And honestly, the national standards that this board is banking on are inadequate. According to Sandra Stotsky at the University of Arkansas, who sat on the Common Core review panel, the language arts standards, quote, will lead to lower levels of literacy for all high school students, with grade level standards of mostly language skill sets and little substantive content, unquote. I would like to add that whoever decides what is core knowledge is extremely pivotal and potentially damaging when considering legislating necessary curriculum for young children.
Ms. Linker, excuse me, can you please conclude?
I am nearly done.
Thank you.
North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest stated that 1/3 of all states in our country have either rejected Common Core or are currently seeking legislative action to pause or back out of implementation. I challenge you to consider the power in your hands, to understand that you are the victim of the same system you are imposing on our students. You know in your heart that there is no such thing as a common experience, a normal intelligence, or a standardized child. You do not have to remain complicit to the reconstruction of the content of learning and the redefinition of excellence. Rather, you can be maladjusted to such effort and reallocate the Common Core funds to the significant and existing needs of our schools.
Thank you, Ms. Linker. Our next speaker then, please. Last call for speaker number 14, Gloria Astorga.